And last week, we were talking about in terms of refactoring the pet store app, and mostly the front end in terms of building it into different components. And more specifically, we have 3 components and the root. So we first talk about, so first you need to build an empty app from using the view CLI. And you don't have to, you could just create all these files manually as well. And that's an option if you want to explore. The main, in terms of refactoring, okay, so again, in terms of refactoring, which basically it means it doesn't change any functionality, or it shouldn't change any functionality. So when user using your app, it should be exactly the same. So all we did was to change how the code is organized. So we're not adding or removing anything. So the way we're organizing the app is we're going to have 3 components. We'll have the root component, which is also the parent, which is called app.view. And this is the files which is created by default if we're using the view CLI to create an empty app. And then we'll have 2 other ones. Remember, if we use exactly the same name, and one called the product list. And that's what to show the list of the products, and then the form, that's for the checkout. We're going to put them under the components and subdirectory. And again, so this is optional. You can put them in the same folder where the app is, and just say, as a common practice, it's better and to put all the components in its own folder, or follow actually a particular structure of the components. For example, if form has its own child components, you may have another subdirectory under components. And okay, well, we'll go through a code a little bit again, where we stopped last week. So we're not going to go through these now. So we add all these. I think we've done all these already. Just quickly flip through to where we stopped the last week. So yeah, and I think this is roughly where we stopped. I can open up the code just to explain quickly, remind you where we are in terms of the code. Doesn't work. Don't need. Okay, we'll have a look at the 3 components we created so far. Yeah, this is a demo one, so it shouldn't be the finished one. So we have the main, which is app.view, and then 2 other child components inside the components subdirectory. So you can see we import these. We import these components first. So this one means the current directory. So that means under the current directory is something called components, and we install product list.view, which is this one here. We also have to then declare here inside the view, as inside this one. Okay, and then this is the data part of the root component. You can see we now use the data is now defined as a function. And everything, all the data used to be variable property used to define and the data is now inside the return object. So return the site name and cart. So the site name here is completely optional, and it was kind of left over. I mean, it was like that before, so we kept it. And more importantly is this cart, which is the array which used to store the items people add to the shopping cart. Okay, and also we defined this show checkout function. Okay, this is meant to switch between the product and the checkout view, and the code will be exactly the same as in the first coursework. As in I can't remember, but it's like the first part of the lectures. I didn't include it here. And what new is add to cart and remove from cart. So these are the two functions, as the name says. This is add something to the cart, and this is remove the lessons from the cart. Sorry, remove the product from the cart. And so the reason we have both of these functions in the root directory, sorry, in the root component, is because cart and is in the root directory or root component. So any child component should not modify the cart directly. Instead, they should send a message and the root component will update the cart. Okay, and so this is before we go through that, we're going to have a quick look of the actual HTML part, which is under the template for this HTML part. So this is where the mounting point is for the view instance. We are using the site name, we define it here. Okay, and this is the button, which is meant to switch between the product list and checkout forms. So when it's clicked, it will run show checkout. Currently it's empty, so it's not doing anything. And here we're also using the product list and checkout, these two components that we imported here and then declared here. Okay, and then say for the product list, and we expect it to emit an add product event. And when that happens, that's what this at is it. So just as say add click, that means when click happens. So you have add product means when add product event happens, we're going to run add to cart. Okay. And then this is what we do. And we say this.cart. So that's this one here, going to push product. And so the product will be included in the message itself, which we're including a product object. I can add that to the end of my cart array. That's what this push does. And I'll just say product.inventory minus minus. Okay. So inventory shows the number of space available for the particular product. And when you show minus minus, we'll reduce that by 1. Okay. And actually, this is where this would work. This actually would work. And because, okay, we need to have a look at the product list here. And so we only has one product. And the problem is that the, what do I say? When we emit the event, and how do I say? It will send the products being added as the object itself as well. And so here we only have this particular event, only product. So only that will be sent, but it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 10 or 100. And the important thing is here we are sending a product. Okay, let me have a look over here. So in the product list, the main part is here. So we had V4. So we'll go through the products and we display it. So the display part will be the same as before. So we show the title, we show a picture, and we show description, price, available stock, etc. Okay. And then we have this button here. When the button is clicked, it's gonna run add to cart, which is this function here. It's gonna emit an event called add products, which will be handled here. So when the add to cart event happens, it will run add product here. And all it does is also including the product. So this product will be, as you iterate through, the product will be the current product being displayed or displayed for that part of the code. Okay. And so we actually essentially sending this JSON object in the message, and which will be received here. And then I'm updating the inventory by reducing it by 1. So you can see here, inventory is 10. I'm going to reduce here by 1. Okay. And this is one of the possible problems here. And it will work. And because when we're passing the product, it's passing by reference, and which means it's not making a new copy of this object, JSON object. It just send a reference, basically a pointer would point you to the actual product. And then therefore here, when we do this products.inventory minus minus, it would actually reduce this value here. Okay. But usually this is not a good thing to do, because a product is an object inside product list component. It really should be only modified here. It shouldn't be modified here in the root component. Yeah, that's very important. So the ideal case is just as say the product list should not modify cart, and ideally is the product list would send a message, and then the root would update or add something to the cart. But it's actually not possible, or not very straightforward, and for the app to say send a message to product list and for it to update its inventory. That's the ideal way to do it, to ensure all the things happen to the products only happens in the product list. Okay, I'm going to come back to that later. Okay, and then similarly, I'm going to explaining the other thing, and which is the checkout. And the first, we are passing the cart to checkout. So in the checkout, for the component, we have a prop called the cart, because we want to display those items in the shopping cart. And the shopping cart is in the root component. So we need to pass that shopping cart to the checkout component and add the props, or which stands for properties, so it can use it. So this is what this is for. So just be careful. Here is a column, which means and bind. So with the bind, the first cart is this name here. Okay, and bind its value to cart. So that's the cart is this cart here. So they're going to send the cart in the root component to the checkout component using the cart property. Yeah, that's this part. And you also need to do this part, which you remove the product. Okay, sorry, this is when the remove product happened, event happened, and you need to run, we're going to run something called the remove from cart. So, and in the shopping cart, the user has option to remove a product from the shopping cart. And again, because the cart is inside the root component, so we don't want to, we should not update the cart in the checkout directly. So instead, so when user click the button remove, it will run remove product function, which only just emit a new event called the remove product, and then including the actual product that being removed. Okay, and then here, once this remove product event is received, remove product, this has to match this, the name of this event here. It's gonna go run this one. So what it will do, and it will go through the cart, and I will check if the ID equal to the ID of the items being sent in the message. Similar before, when we emitted the message, we also sent together with the product itself. And if it is, we're gonna increase this inventory by 1 because we are adding this back to the list. I'm gonna remove that particular product from the shopping cart. So we're gonna try to first find this product. So we say this.cart.index of products. So this returns the index of this particular product, and we're going to remove that using splice. And then we say 1, which means the length. We're going to just remove 1 element from that particular position, which is that product. Okay. Again, so we do this inside the root component because the cart is in here, and we don't want to update or make any changes in the checkout child component. Okay, and so that's where we are in terms of the code where we stopped. And we only have a little bit more to go through, and then we're going to go through the requirements for the next individual one. Okay, and just as we were talking about, this is when we try to remove a product from the shopping cart, and the form component will emit a remove cart event together with actual product to be removed. So this is what we saw here in the checkout. Oh, okay, we call checkout instead of form, so which is slightly different. This will emit an event called the remove product, and together with actual product to be removed. And then the parent or the root component app would remove the product.
Where would this product come from? Is that product in the array in the checkout page?
Yeah.
This product, yeah, where is this product?
So this is the checkout. You have the V4, which is the same or very similar. The V4, then you would have in the, just here.
But yeah, but where is this product coming from in the brackets? Like, where is it declared?
No, so here you say the product in cart. So you iterate through the cart. Every time you get items out of the cart, which is the product. That's also when you do the button.
Oh, you'll go through all of the products and each of the product in the cart is called product, and you will go one by one on each of them, and you will keep on passing. Yeah. Okay.
So this is a similar pattern as you do here. So this is the product list. Again, you go through all the products, and then similarly, when you click, you need to pass on the product. That's the same thing as you would use when you iterate through the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when we do something in the app.view, like any function, where does it call that function first? Like does it first call, let's say I'm in the checkout tag and there's a function. So when the user clicks on that function, is it first called in the checkout page or in the root page?
Yeah, and if it's on the checkout forms, user click this button.
Yeah.
This called add to cart. And it will only call this function because that's part of this component. So the code here. Yeah.
Okay. And then it will send it back to the main root page.
Yeah, then it will do this messaging thing.
Okay.
To the root, and then the root would respond to do the actual thing.
All right.
Okay, hope it's clear. Okay, and then So what should happen is then the product inventory needs to be increased by 1. Okay, so this happens because this particular product being removed from the shopping cart. So the inventory you display in the product list should increase by 1 because there's 1 more now, assuming we just only remove 1 at a time. So it needs to be increased by 1. Yeah. And so this is what we're currently doing here in app.view. When you remove the product, we just say product of inventory ++. So it's the same thing as before. Here, because the product, when it's passed from the checkout component, it's passed by reference. So it's a reference to the product in the cart, which again is a reference to the original product did here when we add this one to the cart. So basically this one is still pointing to the particular product listed here. So that's why it's possible we can just do this. But just as that happened here, this is actually not a good thing to do because we are changing the products not in the where the product is defined. The product is defined here, and really you should be updating to the product should happen in here, not outside this particular component. And then, as we said, it's not that easy to do because there's not easy way for the parent to send a message, and it's possible, but not as straightforward. Okay, yeah, as I said, the proper way to do this, and because the product is in the product list, so we want to do all the updates in the product list component, is for the app component, which is the parent or the root, to notify. So this is like a sending a message or some other way. But for passing something from app to product list, from a parent to a child component, the way we know is either using props or slot. So this is how we know to pass data from parent to child. But actually both of these happens when you first call the component. So this is when you can only use either props or slot when you first use these components. For example, here you can use props, for example, cart, or use slot by putting the values in between the tags. It's not suitable for, say, updating if something changed later on, because when you first use or adding these components to the parent component, and there's no removing or adding product events yet. Okay, and so one possible solution is for the product list to watch the shopping cart and update inventory when there's a change. Okay, so what you can do is you can pass the cart to product list as well. So currently we only pass the cart to checkout. We don't pass it to product list, but you can pass it to that as well as a props. And you can watch if there's any changes in the cart. For example, once the cart has something added or removed, you can update inventory. So that's possible. That's something you can watch. Okay. And then, but we haven't, it's possible, but again, we didn't really cover how to watch changes in Vue. It's definitely possible. Okay. So the other solution would be just to move the product array to the parent component. say here, and we need to update the product either by changing the inventory number or reduce, sorry, this is reduce and this is an increase the inventory number. And this is actually all happening here. Whereas in the product list itself, we actually don't make any changes to the product array. There's no functions. The only function is actually just send a message, that's all it does. And so the other solution would be just to, instead of putting the product here, we're gonna put it inside the root parent, the root component. Okay, and then if it's there, we can just update the inventory or the product array list directly inside the app component. Okay, and the only other change needed is just to pass the product array to product list as a prop so it can be displayed. So this is straightforward. And for the product list, it only needs the array to display, and that's it. It doesn't do anything afterwards, as we said. And we can pass it to this child component as a prop. That's no problem. And we know how to do that. Okay. So this will make the code again. So this is more refactoring. It doesn't change. And currently, the code would work, except saying this is not the right way to do it, and it would work, but it's changing the data outside the component where the data was defined. That's not a good practice. It still will work. And they just say, for example, the disadvantage would be, and later on maybe something wrong with the product, you would not know where the change call and what caused the changes or errors, because the changes are happening outside the component. And if you know the only thing that can change this one is inside that component, that makes it much easier to find errors. Maybe to avoid errors happens in the first place, because sometimes you might hit something in the app component accidentally and affect the product array, which is not intended. But if it's not possible to do that outside the component, that kind of error will not happen. Okay. So to update, we're going to move the products into the root component. So instead of cart, we're going to also have products as well now. Yeah, so this part does not need to be changed at all. Let's do the same as before. But now this is doing properly because the product itself, sorry, is inside this array, which is inside this component. So all we need to do is just take this one. We're going to take this. So the return now becomes empty. And then we're going to put that in here. This will be another data we're going to return. Okay. Yeah. Nothing else needs to change. Okay, and then so that part is done. The other part, okay. We also need to do is that we need to pass the products to a product list so it can display. We're going to do this as a prop. So then here we're going to pass products to the product list, which also means in the product list, we need to define the props so that can be used. This. Okay, so really the only different changes we need to do is just here. and we need to define props, and the props is called products. Okay, and we call it products because that's what is used here, and this way we don't have to make any changes here. And then finally for this part, when we call the components here, product list, we need to pass the products. Okay, the first one is the name of the props. So in this case, called products. And then the second one will be the properties I have in my view instance. So the second product will be this one. Okay. So after I change this, and it should all work as well. Let me see if any other allows. Yeah, the rest it doesn't have to change. It's still exactly the same. Okay, and that's it. And then now if we go back to the app and run this one, I think it's npm runs. Okay, so it's running. Gonna go localhost. Okay, turn on the. Okay, I've been updated. It's fine. I didn't turn that on, so you will not see. But when we click add to cart, and it should show up here. If I can't add again, you're gonna have an error. And because in the checkout, we are using the product.id as the key, and obviously these two has exactly the same ID, so it's not going to work. That's why the error is. And this is going to cause error when you try to remove, for example. Oh, this is actually worked fine. For now, if I click remove, see, you remove two instead of one because they are exactly the same ID. Okay, and that's something you need to fix. And here, I just didn't have time to do that properly. So the solution will be either and use something else as a key. For example, I think you can, oh no, you can't even use index. Oh, maybe you can. Is that? Let's refresh here. Okay. And so we still get a warning. So it's that. And it says try not to use non-primitive values. So it still doesn't like it. Remember there is somewhere. Okay, so that's not the right way. I forgot the right way to do it. And the other option would be to say, instead of just adding a product to your shopping array, you just has only one cat food. It's increase the number of cat food. Okay, so in the array, so it still only has one items. So to do that, what you could do is, for example, let's say in the actual product itself, we have the inventory, and you have another thing, for example, called, I don't know, in cart. Okay, so this just records how many the items is in the cart. Okay, then if you have the in cart is, so 0 means there's nothing in the cart. Anyway, So here needs to be updated as well. So if it's adding, we have to say product.in_cart. It has to be increased. And here, the inventory plus. And instead of this one, and you have to say product.in_cart minus. So it reduce the one in cart. Yeah, and also then in the checkout itself, and then this part needs to change as well. And so it's no longer just pushing the product to the cart. So instead you have to check if the product, if it's already in the cart, and if it's not, and you push it, and if it is, and you just increase its in-cart value. So it will be something similar to this. And let me see, I'm going to do this dot for each, sorry, this dot for each. This case will be product 2. And we'll say if product 2 dot ID equal to product dot ID I'll just say we increase the in-cart by 1. Okay. And if it's not the case, I would just push that into. I'm going to push the product because that doesn't exist in the cart yet. And we still need to say product dot in cart equal to 1. So it's not in there yet, adding 1 in there. And once the first add, it should be 1. And then the inventory minus. Okay, let's see if this works. Let's refresh this or add to cart. Oops. It does not even show up now. This dot card push. Sorry, this else. Return. So that's so actually I'm gonna put the return here. So once you add, you just finish the function. You don't even need return. And so basically, this part and should only happen after the loop here. But you don't want to run this. And if there's something already added, you don't want to do this again. Okay, so But you always want to run this line. You could do this, if that makes sense. So this part, once it's updated, and it will just stop the function, is return. And if this never happens, it will run here. So just push the product in, change it, set it as incart is 1. And inventory. Then I have to display the number as well. In checkout. Ooh. So display the items and how many they are in the cart. Let's refresh, add. Oops. It's still adding. Okay, let's do something wrong. It's adding 3 at the moment. Let me see, why is that the case? In the check. So it will be the add function, okay. If product, so okay, so that means maybe this return is not working. Okay, maybe that's not the right thing to do. So this will be let pause. So this is just a flag to say if the items is added or not. Yeah, say if not added. Do this. And then the product of inventory will be minus. Okay, so I set a flag. So if we find the product in the array, so I'm going to increase this in cart, and that will change the added to true. So these only happens if it's not added. And we're going to push the product to there, set the value as 1. And then I'm going to do the product of inventory minus. Okay, let's try again. Add, yeah. Again, okay, good. So you can see cat foot 2. And if we remove 1, you can see these reduce and this one reduces. This one increases. Okay, yeah. So this is the final version of our refactoring. So, and if you have another product, if you add it, then it should show up here. And you would not have the, how do I say, the errors message saying this is a duplicate ID.
By the way, both of these root page and the checkout page need to be like in one single page. Like it doesn't need to be in like 2 different tabs or something.
Yeah, I mean, so ideally, and it's up to you, I think. So here I didn't do, and it's only because I didn't copy the code of this show content from the first coursework. And if you already have that one in there, then you'll be able to switch that between the 2.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And here, I just didn't copy the code from the first coursework or previous examples.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, for the course and for the certain coursework, individual work is up to you. Either will be fine. Usually, it's better to for this one on a separate view. At least because it's easier, you have lots of things displayed here. This will be at the very bottom. It's just not as easy to see because here in the checkout, it will actually display. Sometimes it displays actual items as well, just to make the whole thing very long, not very nice. Okay, and I think that's everything I want to cover. And in terms of the refactoring, and so that's covered as the readings. So the last bit in terms of show the number here, I didn't include in the lecture slides, but the code you should be able to see from the video or just watched. Okay, so that's that covers actually all the things we want to cover, content in terms of the module for this module. And if we go back here, so we are currently now in week 21, and we're going to go through the requirement for the course, the last individual work. And then the next week is when the individual work will do work. And so there will be no lectures or labs, and questions, just email me. And then I'm gonna, for the week 23 and 24, I'm gonna do the demonstration. Just as before, I'm gonna set up a scheduler here and just enter the individual straight coursework, and you can book a time. So, and all the slots for the demonstration will be online. And if you need to do an in-person demonstration, again, just book a slot first and then email me. Usually just come to my office, which is in TG07, and you can do the demonstration here. Okay, and any questions about that one?
I've got a question, please.
Yeah, sure, go on.
Is today's lab online or in person?
Okay, today is online, and it meant to be in person, but I said in my message, if you see, it says all the demonstration will be online, and if you need to be in person, email me.
So today's lab will be online then?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. Also, I've got a question about fetching. I'm having a bit of problem when it comes to fetching for the refactoring, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I think that's the thing best we discuss in the lab.
Okay.
Or maybe wait on, if we had a bit more time after I went through the requirements for the coursework straight,
Okay.
we can have a look.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And is there any other just general question in terms of the coursework 3?
I got a question about the demonstration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have is it all online? The coursework 3 demonstration.
Is the demonstration what overline or
Online.
yeah?
For coursework 3.
And I will send another message once the slot for the coursework 3 individual work demonstration becomes available. As I said, all the demonstration will be online unless you want to do an in-person demonstration, in which case you email me. So we make a, so I know you're going to come to my office, for example, to do the demonstration. Okay, and I assume that answers the question.
Yeah.
Any other question? Okay, so now I'm just going to go through the requirements for the last coursework. Okay, so the first thing is, it has slightly less mark than the previous 2 individual work, just to make sure add up to total 100%, not 105%, so it's 20%. Okay, and so the task is exactly what we have been covering in the last few weeks. So we need to refactor the front end using the single file component. Yeah. So because this is the refactoring, which means we're not changing any features. If it's there, it's still there. So I'm not going to repeat what other features are because they're going to be exactly the same as required in the coursework 1 and 2. We're just changing the code. Actually, just coursework 1 because we're only doing the front end. And so as a result, the front end should have all the features as and required in the coursework 1. As I said, we just doing refactoring, not changing any features. So it should lose or add. I mean, if you want to add something new, that's completely fine. But if you don't, if I don't say, just assume it should be the same as coursework 1. And so the refactoring should have three. The refactored app has 3 single file components. And again, exactly the same as we demonstrated with the Pet Store. You have a root component. You have a lesson component, which shows a list of lessons, and then checkout component, which allows you to see the list of the things you added to the shopping cart and maybe update and submit the order. So you can either remove the items from the shopping cart or submit the order. Okay, and that's the exact same as we demonstrated in the lecture. And in the submission, again, because we only do, let's say, you should have the URL to the GitHub repository and the URL to the GitHub pages. So I think someone asked me this already. So because it's possible to deploy onto the GitHub pages, but it's not as easy because the view file we created, the single file components we created itself cannot be directly displayed in the browser. You have to compile or transpile it, and you should only upload the transpile file to this GitHub pages, and which we didn't cover in the lecture. So if you want to, you can do that. Otherwise, just demonstrate. This is for the demonstration, just run locally, would be fine. Okay, but you still should put the links in your submission and your GitHub repository and the pages. And also, essentially, you should submit a copy of your GitHub repository in the zip file, so all the code. So this you have been doing before, and for the first and second coursework should be the same. Okay, and don't include any node module folders. And in our case, you will have one because to use the single file components and node needs to download some modules like the view CRI and some other things. So you would have one. Look at, if I look at mine, now I have this node modules. I have lots of files in there. Okay, and don't include this in the submission. So to do this, you just use git ignore, and which you should have used for the second coursework. And again, don't including any backend files. So all we need is just the front end. So you only need to submit the refactored front end, and don't need to including any backend files. But make sure your backend is running. So your front end is supposed to get the data from the server. So that means when during demonstration or when I check your code, and the Heroku and MongoDB needs to be running online. And it should be. If you don't do anything, it should be. Just don't shut it off. That's all. Don't delete it or anything. Just to make sure they're running. And any questions so far?
About the Refact app, if you go a little bit up, so you said there the URL to the GitHub pages. So,
yeah.
And you said the files cannot be run. Why can't the file runs, and what's the point of having the GitHub pages if they can't run?
No. GitHub pages, it just says we have a link to your GitHub pages. The first part is saying because the code on your GitHub repository will be, say, something like app.view or products.view and checkout.view. These are the things you cannot display using GitHub page directly.
Yes. So why do we need to include the GitHub page link?
Yeah, just have a link there. I mean, if you don't, so long as you have the GitHub repository URL, would be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and if I have the GitHub repository, I have the GitHub pages links anyway. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
normally, how would you normally run these files?
No, I have to run it locally.
Locally. Okay.
Normally, and I have to get the code downloaded from the repository and run locally, so it will come transpile and it can be run.
Oh, and it will do it automatically. It's just like a live server.
No, and I would have just as what I do here, for example. So I need to download your repository, and I'll clone that on my computer, and I then just here run npm serve.
Oh, okay.
It will create a local server, transpile everything, and then I can run on my computer. That's usually how I would run.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, and yeah, now comes to the marking criteria. Again, it's very similar to what we covered in the lecture. So we have the marks for the root component, and then the marks for the lesson and checkout component. Okay, the actual names can vary, but there should be one child component which displays a list of lessons, one do the checkout. Okay, and in the root component, it needs to import the child component, these two. Okay, and then you have the card button shows the number of lessons and switching between the two views, the lesson and checkout. So this is exactly the same as in coursework 1. It just now need to work as a component. Okay, and retrieve the lesson information from MongoDB Atlas through the REST API. So this part will be you would have done in second coursework. And then you pass the lesson to the lesson components as a prop. So this is what we showed today. The lessons itself, the array, and should be inside the root component and passed to the lesson as a prop, and then get displayed. Okay, and again, in the root component needs to respond to the add lesson event by adding a lesson to the shopping cart. So again, the shopping cart itself will be inside the root component, and it would respond the event and then add the lessons to the shopping cart. So basically, these are the props and the image and messaging event handler for the lesson component. And then these two are the props and the event handler for the checkout component. So you need to pass the cart to the checkout component or form component so it can be displayed there. And it's really up to you and what it's called. And then when you need to remove something from the shopping cart and you want to trigger event or emit an event in the checkout component, and then in the main component or root component, you would respond to that and then remove a lesson from the shopping cart. And any questions about this? Or so basically it's exactly the same as we covered in the example. Okay, and then the actual lesson and checkout component is relatively light, and because actually all the data, the cart and shopping list, the lesson list, and also all the adding and removing lessons all happening in the root component. Okay, for the lesson, it will display a list of lessons. and this will be passed to it using the prop as mentioned here. Okay, and each lesson have an add to cart button, and so it does not update or change the cart array directly in the lessons. So if you do that, you're going to lose mark.
Excuse me, so I have a question.
Yeah.
So on the lesson component, it says must display a list of lessons as required in coursework 1.
Yeah.
So in coursework 1, we didn't actually use fetch. So we would have to actually write, put the lessons in the JSON format.
No.
Is that what it means?
Okay, so here, in terms, it just says, if you look at here, displays lessons, you should have 10 lessons. Each lesson has this information. So you were talking about this.
Oh, okay.
And you don't have to do this, and you can just retrieve the lessons from the backend, that's fine.
Okay.
And also this, and you use V4 to display.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's more like the front end. It's talking about the front end.
Yeah, not about this one. This is,
Okay.
yeah, you don't have to do this.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and come back here.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
How has it been shown to how to do props? Because I'm looking at the example code. I haven't seen props anywhere.
Huh?
Um,
And the props is covered. I can tell you which lecture is. I'm not going to redo it again. So that will be maybe inside the view component. I can't remember either.
It's in the view component.
Sorry?
It's in the view component.
Yeah, so this is a view component. Props.
thank you.
So there's a section called the parsing data with props. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it's covered. Okay, so that's the lesson component. Back to here. So you display the lesson component, display the list, and also have this button, and which does not add items lesson to the shopping cart itself, but instead of sending a message or event, which asks the root to do that. Yeah, and it's similar for the checkout, and the checkout will display all the lessons in the shopping cart, and then it has this remove lesson button, which would again not updating the cart directly inside the component, but instead it will trigger event. So the actual root component would remove the lesson from the shopping cart. And for the checkout component, you can still have the, say, the name, phone number, submit button, extract. So that's those part, it doesn't need to change. So I did not include that in the marking scheme. And okay, any questions for this part?
So the card and the product or the lesson list will both the areas will actually both be in the root component. The child components will only like trigger the emit so that the root can do the function. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So okay.
So both the lesson I didn't mention here. I'll not actually mention here, and then the cart should be in the root, and then it will be passed to the component, child component as props. And again, actual add lesson or remove lesson would happen in the root as well. The child component only say emitted event. Sorry, yeah, emitted event. That's all it does.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions about the requirements?
In the lesson component, do we use fetch or do we use it in the root components?
No, I think the fetch would happen in the root component. It says retrieves all the information from MongoDB here. That happens in the root component.
Because say display the lessons on the lesson component.
Huh?
They say display the lessons that are required. Yeah. I thought that means using the fetch in the lesson components.
No, the so it says you retrieve the lesson to the lesson component as a prop.
Mm.
Then the lesson component would display that.
Oh, so we use the fetch in the root components and then get the information from the lesson component.
Yeah, then pass it to the lesson component.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. Any other question?
Has passing the lesson component been demonstrated?
Huh?
Has it been demonstrated how to do that? Because I'm not too sure. Passing.
Yeah. So okay, so it's just using prop. Once you know how to use prop, it's also covered in, we demonstrated that today in the lecture. We where is it? So for example, here, is that here? So that's just how to use props. You have to define it. But once you understand how to use prop, it shouldn't. We already covered that in the lecture today as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other question? Okay. And if you don't have any more questions, we still have the lab this week. And each lab will have at least half an hour just to answer you any specific questions about the coursework for individual work. And it is also time. And if you want to, for example, show me and your specific code and have problems, I can try to help you to solve that. Yeah. And again, next week, we can also do that, except that we don't have specific, we don't just run labs, just email me and we can set a time, either do it online or in person.